Now, if someone would adjust my PowerPoint for me, that would be very kind. And I'd like to start my own presentation by saying something about the world scene. And it really fits with the analysis we've just heard. Because last week in Dubai, we saw the establishment of a World Free Zone organization, on the board of which sits Mr. Dai Haibo from Shanghai. And it fills a gap in that until then there had been no functioning membership organization for free zones around the world. It's my profound hope that the new World FZO will fill this gap effectively. Now, we have compared the history of zones with the present. In Europe, we trace free zones back to the free cities of northern Germany. We've mentioned Hamburg and Lübeck and others, who as long ago as the 12th century AD adopted techniques facilitating trade. Now, at that time, the autocratic princely rulers of Europe, in the Holy Roman Emperors, tended to favor military conflict and territorial acquisition. Here we see Henry II, who spent most of his reign in the 11th and 12th century waging war in Poland. But compared with that, we saw the leaders of those city-states, and here we have a coin from Hamburg, merchant leaders creating free ports and developing free trade agreements with a network of their peers across Europe, which eventually developed into the Hanseatic League, a sort of early common market, or even a prototype TPP. So there are many parallels with the contemporary developments and the historic free ports. As Mr. John said, they tend to be relatively compact, defined geographical areas, secure, well-policed, good infrastructure, and so on. And yet, there is rather limited academic literature on free zones, and we find that we are learning by doing. There's some good work by an Italian academic, Dr. Francesca Trampas, and by the World Bank. And the World Bank's latest message is to urge a more flexible approach on free zone development. They emphasize that zones are changing and evolving. And I would like just to pick up that theme. How are they evolving? Because it's very relevant to Shanghai. Because zone advantages tend to be conferred by governments, success requires both astute policy design, careful monitoring, a preparedness to learn from mistakes, to amend the package, to adjust the regime. And a message I have for Shanghai to offer respectfully is that changes are signs of success in this environment. Now, it's no coincidence that the launch of the World Organization took place in Dubai, because Dubai has been an exemplar of this innovative transformation of zones, which one academic, Professor Easterling, has called extra statecraft, a phenomenon that acknowledges that multiple forces, state, non-state, military, market, non-market, come together to achieve the power and administrative authority necessary to build infrastructure. And the zone, seen in this way, is a dynamic crossroads of trade, of finance, of management, of communications. And we can trace three evolutionary eras for zones. The first era, from the mid-16th century, building on those free cities, to the 1930s, and here we see the US Foreign Trade Zone program in the 1930s, dominated by the free port, the transshipment role. A second role from the late 50s to the 70s, focusing on export processing zones. And a third starting probably in the 1980s, seeing the rise of special economic zones, economic and technological zones, science industrial parks. In the contemporary world, we see something quite new, the zone city. Since Jebel Ali was established in 1985, Dubai has hosted zones for almost every possible activity. We've heard our speakers mention them: the internet, healthcare, Silicon Oasis, Knowledge Village, Media City, outsourcing zone, humanitarian city, textile village. And these activities go far beyond simple transshipment. And here we see the Dubai International Financial Center, which has an entirely different legal regime to that applying in the rest of the UAE. Here in Shanghai, too, we have seen the establishment, even this month, of a court of arbitration. It rather picks up Professor Schiller's message from our opening session when he said we need to have more lawyers. Well, perhaps we're going to see actually more arbitrators who may be cheaper and faster than traditional lawyers, but we get the point. The point is they help free zones thread together the existing global contractual networks into a growth regime. So where are these heading? What are these transformations? They're also changing our urbanism, and it reminds us of books like Benjamin Barber's If Mayors Ruled the World, with its arresting subtitle, Dysfunctional Nations, Rising Cities. I was very glad when I saw the name of the new Shanghai zone, Pilot. Because, as Mr. John said, it shows that the zone is not a special privileged enclave arrangement for Shanghai, but the testing of concepts that, if successful, can be applied to the whole of China or emulated in other parts of China. It is a profoundly correct approach because it tackles head-on one of the most serious political challenges to zones, the challenge of the zone border and the differential and advantageous regime which applies within it. And that seems to me the question which has bedeviled European policy in this area, where many of the benefits of zones have been regarded as state aid, as special privileges, and have been constrained and policed by the European Union, reducing the potential of zones. That issue, ladies and gentlemen, is completely solved, in my opinion, by a pilot concept. Because if a zone is attesting techniques which in due course may be extended to the rest of a country, then the benefits within the zone are at once legitimated within it and aspired to it outside the zone. And what might have been seen as an unfair advantage, if it continued forever, can no longer be seen in that perspective if it is a measure from which in due course all can expect to benefit. And the second cause for rejoicing is this tentative, aspirational and fluid concept associated with a pilot. The negative list is an important tool. Why is this? It's because we should, I think, realize now that legislation doesn't always get things right the first time. There isn't always one correct answer. President Xi Jinping, when he visited the zone this last week, made the point when he stressed that Shanghai is a large pilot that needs careful management, and that should combine structural reform and new methods while controlling the risks and gradually making improvements. One measure may work, another may not work. I remember in Stockholm a week or two ago, they have deregulated the taxi cab system. As a result, you can step into a taxi and find you're paying 10 times the price as the other taxi in the line. This causes some caution and patience in developing our approach. So let me conclude then with 3 messages. First, zones are not selfish enclaves, they're a testing ground. Second, zones can spread their benefits to the rest of our economies. Third, zones have moved from the narrow, early functions to the concept of a zone city with the widest range of economic and social techniques, and have a very important role to play right across nations and across society. And therefore, the success of the China-Shanghai pilot zone will be watched very closely around the world, because it could herald the next development of free trade zones globally. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your attention, and with great pleasure I now hand over to chair our discussion to Professor Xuangjun.